UN mission, when we came to know in our training that there is such a facility, there's such a opportunity being given to DAD officer to be part of the Indian Army contingent. So the first dream that became fulfilled was to wear a uniform.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Afsar Ka Safar. Today we are going to meet an esteemed officer from Indian Defence Account Service. She cleared UPSC in 2009 and has had a number of interesting postings, including one with UN Peacekeeping Force. So let us welcome her and ask her how has this journey been for her so far. Her name is Mugdha Ranade and her current place of posting is Ahmedabad. Welcome Mugdha and thank you so much for joining us today. It's a great pleasure to have you. And I know that your father was in the army and so you have seen one side of the story. But now that you are in Defence Account Service and you have been related to them for so long, how do you see any change or is there any difference? Tell us a little about it.
Hi to everyone, and thank you, ma'am, for such an opportunity to me. And I'm very honored to be here today. Yes, I have seen one side of the army, and I have been brought up in that environment. And that time, probably, I did not know that where all the facilities are coming from, where all the salaries are coming from. In fact, so much so that when I got selected in the service, for some time I did not even know that this is the service which pays my father. So then when he mentioned that, okay, you're going there and you'll be on the other side of the table now auditing us and seeing
Right.
what all wrong things we are doing or what has to improve. So it is a good experience. The best part about being from army background is I can relate to the services. I can understand their issues. I can understand their hierarchy. I can understand a few cliche things that generally we don't understand.
Right.
So why a particular place is not able to get basic things, or why a particular place is not able to forward their documents in time. So all that sensitivity already exists in me, that they don't have to explain it to me that why such a thing is happening.
Right.
So that has been a very good experience. And in fact, when I tell the other side, the forces, that I'm a Fauji kid, so immediately the inhibitions go,
Right.
and they become so friendly and they become so open and very caring, and they treat you as part of their own fraternity and own family.
Okay. Right. But since you mentioned this is an account service is what we have understood. Is there auditing also included in your service?
Yes, what we do is an internal audit.
Okay.
And we give them financial advice as well, pre-procurement.
Okay.
And we do payment of the salaries for defense officers, defense personnel, and defense civilians.
Okay.
And we do accounting overall.
Okay.
So we have offices across India at various levels. So major function till for a long time was as a paymaster. So basically you distributed the salaries and you did accounting for all the expenditure. Slowly the audit purview has expanded to such a thing that we are internal auditors. We are co-located with them for audit.
Okay.
So and we provide the groundwork for external audit. So whenever the CAG does the audit for defense, they treat us as internal auditors, and whatever are our observations, they become they get converted into major financial irregularities, MFAIs that we call, all or audit objections that according to the gravity they are dealt with by different levels of hierarchies.
Okay. So some part is managed by you, if I've understood it right, and some part is managed by the army personnel. Is that correct?
So we have different offices with different functions. For example, I am currently posted at Ahmedabad.
Right.
My office is called Area Accounts Office, which is a sub office of a regional controller.
Okay.
And I right now look after the payments of salaries as well as payments for procurements, whatever procurements the army has carried out.
Okay.
There is another office that is of a financial advisor, which is located at a different place, and we are that way not connected to each other per se. We are of the same department, but we are different entities. So that particular office is looking after the financial advice, that is pre-procurement as a CFO of a company,
Okay.
like that, a pre-procurement financial advisor to the forces.
Okay.
And there is another third setup of audit, which will be looking after audit. So all of us are performing different functions. There are different offices under the same department. However, we individually are not reporting to each other, but reporting at a common higher platform.
Okay. Mukta, you had told me that you were in UN peacekeeping force as well for a year. I'm really interested in knowing how was that experience and what you have learned from that.
UN mission, when we came to know in our training that there is such a facility, such a opportunity being given to DAD officer to be part of the Indian Army contingent. So the first dream that became fulfilled was to wear a uniform. So because I knew that I won't be able to wear a uniform otherwise, and this one whole year I was wearing the uniform, I was putting on the stars, I was a major in the army.
Great.
And I was treated like one, for which I'm very thankful. So this was something exciting that my department does. Otherwise, all the other work is a very routine kind of a work, like payment, accounts, audit. It's a very, very routine on the desk job.
Right.
However, UN mission was something that you're going on in a conflict region, and while preparing for UPSC, you've learned so much about the international politics. And when I got the opportunity to go to Golan Heights, like I was totally mesmerized that yes, I am going to go to the place.
Right.
So that was one good thing. The other good thing on my family part was that I got a lot of support, because when I go there, I can't take my family along. Okay. And I had a 2.5-year-old son at that time. Oh. So my in-laws were very, very cooperative, and they said that you don't bother, this is very good for your career. You go ahead and we will look after him. Right. So he was here with his grandparents for a year, and I was there. And I recommend to everybody that whenever you get to represent India on an international platform, one should not miss the opportunity. Right. It kind of opens up so many horizons in your life. You view things completely from a different perspective, from a broader perspective. Mm-hmm. And going there and cooperating with other nations. There was Ireland with us, and there was Fiji with us in the camp. So we had constant interaction with them. So how work is done in an international environment. So that was quite a bit that I could learn. Apart from that, visiting Jerusalem was a great opportunity. Okay. Then we visited Jordan and Egypt. So again, those who have studied for UPSC with such an international history and all. So it's an opportunity that is beautiful. So it was a very good thing, and I learned a lot of international points of view also. Like, for example, we came to know about the Syrian point of view, we came to know about the Israeli point of view, and we came about the forces that are actually playing and who is suffering. In the end, it is the villages and the villagers at the ground where that line of division has gone through. They are the sufferers. Rest all are just talks that are going on. Right. So so it was a ground reality that many people would not understand unless you're there and you're looking at it.
Right. So tell me, from your experience, 2 questions I have. One, when you went, was it women friendly? Like we have these questions when you visit outside, and especially now when you visited with the army personnel. Was it friendly in those terms, that the environment, and apart from those, the living conditions and other things, were they friendly to you?
Yeah, so here actually I will not be able to give an unbiased answer, because I am from the Fauji background and my father-in-law was a serving general at the time when I went in the mission. So the commanding officer of the contingent was more than under stress to look after me. Okay. But he did tell me, confess that when he came to know that a woman officer is going to join him on the mission, he was a little perturbed. He was like, how this is going to play out, and how am I going to, keep the balance, and how the other officers will react to it. So he had many apprehensions.
Right.
But when I spent time with them, and there is something that you have to spend 2 months with the troops in Delhi itself, where they are in a camp. So that I was not able to do, because they said that, ma'am, we don't have facility for women, like separate facilities. All the Jawans are staying together under one tent. So
Right.
that would not be possible. But all other things, I mean, they had to be friendly with me. They had no other option. But yeah, so they were friendly with me. In fact, I was unfair to them, I can say, because there was, when we go to the camp, they have a common staying area with common bathrooms. So there is one commanding officer who gets a separate accommodation, and one deputy commanding officer who gets a separate accommodation. But because I was a lady, the deputy commander had to forego his accommodation, and he stayed with the officers in the hostel, and I got a separate accommodation with attached bathroom and everything. So yeah, so that was convenient, and for them also it was convenient, because otherwise a lot of issues come up and a lot of inconveniences happen.
Right.
But it was good, and on my part I tried to not make much fuss, so it was convenient for both of us. And as we got to know each other and became comfortable with each other, then they started including me in all their activities, and all the cultural activities, and all the adventurous or trekking. Everywhere they invited me very cordially.
Okay, that is great. Now, coming to my second question, when you read about the places that you visited, Syria and Egypt and other places, you hear one side of the story. At times, you read more books and you get to know most of the sides. But then, when you visited, did you see any difference as to what you read and what was the reality? Was there a stark difference, or was it quite similar to what you read?
Yeah, so when we read about a particular conflict that is going on, we kind of have prejudices that the place will be depressing, the place will be, so like a curfew would be going on all the time, and you will not be allowed to go into civil areas and things like that.
Right.
But when I went, I found that the more the conflict, the merrier the place was. The place was so vibrant, because it is something like you're getting limited time to do to enjoy. So
Right.
there is no certainty at what time some explosion will happen, what time suddenly all the curfews will be set, and what time somebody will die. Right. So the life is so vibrant there that they're living every day. They are seizing every day to the most, so that they don't miss living. So that we found, they are very the local people. So where the camp is in Golan Heights, there are a few Arab villages.
Okay.
The Arabs, as we know, they are Daryadil, so they are really, their hospitality is really good. They will give you, they have fruit gardens over there, so they will just simply give you baskets and baskets of apples and strawberries and lychees and berries that they have grown without asking anything for return, without thinking of anything. They will give it to you.
Right.
On the other side, the Jewish, they are so miser, they will not even give you an ounce of tea without taking payment from you. So, though sometimes as Indians, we tend to be biased towards the Jews, and we tend to feel that all the conflicts are by Arabs, and all the conflict, the root of conflict is the religion, the Muslim religion. But when we go there, the Muslims and the Arabs are so excited to be with Indians, and they love the Bollywood, and they love the culture, and they will be just praise and praise. And that is the reason why Israel and Palestine has more of Indian contingents in the UN, because both the countries don't have a problem with India.
Okay.
Otherwise, on an international arena, there are allies of Israel and there are allies of Syria. So they don't want any one particular, any force that is leaning towards one particular side.
Right.
So Indians are wanted in UN mission for being unbiased and for being very fair.
Okay.
So that is one perception of India that is there.
Great. This UN peacekeeping force, just to understand, this is more of a diplomatic mission, and it is more to resolve the conflict, or how is it? Or is it only to understand what is going on and then maybe come back and then somebody else is going to do that job?
There are different objectives of UN missions. However, the one where I went, the Golan Heights, is an observatory mission.
Okay.
So there is a treaty between Israel and Palestine, Israel and Syria, regarding observing a line of control, and regarding keeping their armies and infantries and tanks at a particular distance from this line of control. So the UN mission there is right in the middle where the line of control is, and it only observes whether both the parties are following what they have signed before.
Okay.
So whether if they can have only infantry only after 5 kilometers away from the border. So are they keeping their infantries away, or is someone coming inside? Are they building a camp kind of a thing within 5 kilometers? If they have to keep their air force 20 kilometers away, are they keeping that? So this observation and whatever anomaly is there, that we have to report to the UN. So it's only an observatory mission.
Okay.
They keep patrolling the places on both sides, and whatever anomaly would be there, they will report it to the higher authorities. That's the only
This is
work.
an ongoing thing. I mean, you have come back, but somebody else has replaced this.
Yes, has gone in. Yes. So this mission is going on, I think, after the Yom Kippur War happened and some treaty was signed. After that, this mission has come into place at the request of Syria, not at the request of Israel.
Okay.
Because in the war, Syria is saying that Israel has captured our territory. So that's why Syria has asked for this mission.
Right.
So when this whole ISIS crisis happened, and when this Al-Nusra and Al-Qaeda, all the terrorist activities were going on, it was going on the Syrian part of the Golan Heights, on that side.
Okay.
And Syria was not able to have any administrative control over this area. And our logistic battalion was on the Israeli side.
Okay.
So though we were in Israel, we were representatives of Syria, and that's why Israeli people had a lot of hostilities towards us. They did not respect the UN at all, and they felt that this is an intrusion into our territory and why are you here? But they also kind of took int from these saying, oh, what's happening on the other side?
Right.
So they kind of collected intelligence from the UN peacekeeping contingents also, that if some movement happens, they know something is happening on the other side.
Right.
So when my work was mainly to give payments to the troops and to keep accounting of the battalion.
Okay.
So I used to visit a bank to collect money and distribute it in troops, and so I had some civil contact. So even in the banks, many people used to ask me that, hope the Syrians are keeping you busy, because if they're not keeping you busy, then they will trouble us.
Okay.
So, they say as long as they're fighting amongst themselves, we are safe.
Right.
So these kind of reactions one used to get.
Okay.
And the difficult part for the mission was now that treaty has to be observed by both the parties. So what happened was that when this entire belt was taken over by ISIS, and Syrian administration and army did not have any control on this area, so Israel started questioning the very existence of UN mission there, saying that if they cannot follow their treaty because they don't have the control over their territory, then why are we expected to follow our part? So they had started kind of pushing in with their weapons and with their tanks and everything, saying that if they are not following, then why should we? So to keep the balance, to keep talking, so the force commander, there's a force commander who looks after all the forces of UN mission that are there. So the force commander has to keep meeting the Israeli administration, has to keep meeting the Syrian administration, both the army counterparts and the diplomats, to really keep that burning situation under control and keep patrolling and keep that area away from, getting instigated at any point in time.
Right.
And we used to see cross-border firing, and we used to hear a lot of noise of bullets, to the point that we started becoming so used to it that we could not sleep if everything was quiet.
Right.
So, and our barracks were so close to the border that even some officers used to, because incidents have happened apparently, that stray bullets coming into our camps and stray hand grenades or missiles coming into and shattering some of the windows and shelters. So they used to keep telling me, ma'am, your bunker is the most vulnerable, and so if something happens, you can always call us. If it gets burnt up or something, you can let us know.
So you have
Yeah, that was there.
you've seen a very different side of what we only imagine what it must be. We feel kindly for these people, but we are also surprised as to how they have been living with it. So kudos to you. I'm sure you must have had.
Yeah, it was a great experience, and it was living on the edge. So you appreciate your life even more after being at.
Hello.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
The voice cracked in between. Okay, so moving on, and now I'm going to ask you a little about your preparatory days, because since you were in the army, I don't know what kind of things were going on in your mind. How did you decide to give UPSC?
Yeah, it's very. I don't know. It was not a childhood dream, definitely. I did not want to get into army also. I was interested in languages. So firstly, I was very mesmerized by Sanskrit. So that I had decided that I'm going to do something in Sanskrit.
Right.
So after my 10th, I took admission in Pune in Ferguson College in 11th. So I took up German also because they said that both the grammars are quite similar. So I never pursued my education from career point of view.
Okay.
I took up a subject that I enjoyed. So I just wanted to study that. And whatever came in my way, whatever opportunities. So if I had to take German in college, I started learning Japanese from the university department outside. They have lectures. So I had joined arts because I wanted a lot of time on my hand, because I wanted to do so many things. Right. I was interested in dance, so I was learning Bharatnatyam also from Sujata Tai Sapekar in Pune. Great. So every week I had evening classes every day. So I used to, and since I was so interested in Sanskrit, my mornings were also busy because I wanted to attend every lecture. So I never bunked any lectures in the college, and I did all the activities. So my friends used to sometimes tell me, you are in arts, please have some time on your hand. You are just running from one place to another. So that was there. And I would also like to mention that my husband, Anmol, we met in class 10, and we kind of proposed to each other, and we kept in contact, though he studied in Chandigarh and Dehradun later on. So actually, I did not have that work in college. Like, I did not have to go around with anybody. So I had a lot of time on my hands. So I did not have to go on dates in the evenings. Like, we were on phone all the time.
Right.
So I had a lot of time on my hand, and that's why I did classical dance. I did foreign languages, and at a point I wanted to become a translator or an interpreter.
Okay.
And I was working in that direction because career was never on mind, but during graduation I felt that maybe I will do some job, and so maybe I should have some skills. So, and I am the second child, so actually nobody expected anything from me. My sister became an engineer, and that was okay, and she did her MTech from IIT Powai. So all that was taken care of. Like, one child has made them proud. Right. And so there was no pressure on me. So I just kind of, went with the flow. And when the interpreter thing happened, I started looking, where will I get the opportunities for interpretations and for translations. And then somebody said that, yeah, there are so many embassies all over the world, and there are so many other country embassies in India. So you can get a job there. So then I started Googling about what is an embassy and who's an ambassador and everything. And then I thought that why should I be an interpreter? Why should I be a translator only? Why can't I be the ambassador himself?
Right.
So, so then when that struck me, and then I started how to become an ambassador. And then I came across this exam called UPSC, that you have to join an Indian Foreign Service, and then only you can become a diplomat and an ambassador. And only keeping IFS in mind, I have appeared for these exams.
Okay.
So, and also being from army background, I have mostly stayed in cantonments. So I have never seen a panchayat. I have never been affected by a municipal corporation. So IAS was not in my vocabulary.
Okay.
I did not know who an IAS is.
Right.
So, but when this IFS came in my head, then there was no looking back, and then I prepared. So every time I used to put IFS as my first option. I used to put cross to all other options.
God.
But when I could not clear 3 attempts, then in the 4th attempt, I gave preference to all subjects. By then, I was humbled. And it was told to me that jo milta hai, le lo.
Yes, made sure that you will take all the boxes.
Yeah, otherwise you don't get service allocation even if you clear. So when I missed on my 3 attempts, then that small urge of at least being in the list of successful candidates came in my mind, and then I ticked everything, and I was like, "Mera naam to aa jaye, at least they should, Yeah, and then it was a very something unusual that happened was that all in my 4 attempts, my name did not come in the list.
Okay.
So, and in my last attempt, I had given my mains, and then I had got married, because I had decided that after marriage, I'm not going to give any more attempts. So I gave all my attempts before marriage, and then I got married, and then I got called for interview in March. And when I went for the interview, after every interview, I used to feel maybe I am the topper this year. So my name will be number 1 now. So with that confidence, I used to come back, and then the name never appeared in the list. The entire list of 1,000 people, I was not there. So when that happened again in the 4th attempt, then I was like, now I will do something back. I'll go back to Sanskrit, and I will do some teaching and lecturership. And in that also, I had big plans, that I will go to foreign universities, and I'll be a guest lecturer and things like that. So this happened. This was going on for some time, and then suddenly they said that a letter came saying that a supplementary list has come out, and in that you have got your name has come. And so this was in 2011, and they told that आपने जो 2008 में exam दिया था, for that a list has come out, a second attempt list has come out, and you have been allotted Indian Defence Account Service.
Okay.
So after this list came in April, and still we were discussing, should I join or should I not join? And the thing is, I'm not a commerce student. I've never done accounting in my entire life. And what will I do? I mean, I had a feeling that I will betray the country if I join this service.
Right.
Because I have no skills. So then a lot of people convinced, a lot of people, my in-laws, they took me to a lot of people who were in the service, and they said, no, it's not like that. Every government servant learns on the job, and the entire job is for common sense. It's nothing to do with accountancy. You don't have to sit down and tally anything in the service. That will be done by subordinates. What you have to do is basically HR, and see to it that things are done in proper manner. So your work is supervisory. It's okay if you don't know the meaning of accounts. That's fine. So when I got that kind of a feedback, and they said you will learn on the job, and it's merely that you should be prepared for being there and solving problems.
Right.
Then and since I did not have anything else to do, there was no concrete plan. So, and my husband is an entrepreneur, so he's busy all the time. So he said, you also become busy, otherwise you will bicker, and you will be behind me, and you will eat my head. So he said, you also go somewhere, hate us.
Right. Okay.
So this is how I ended up joining. And then everybody said, ki pehle kyun mana kar rahe? Why are you saying no to it? Resigning takes 2 minutes, and getting selected takes such a long time and efforts. So just go and see. If you like it, it's good. If you don't like it, then you can take a call. So that way I came, and I have a strong feeling that once you join the government, you become unemployable for anything else.
Yes.
So then you have to continue in the job.
So that's not true. But so you effectively stumbled into this, but are you liking the job now?
Yeah, one thing is that when you see things happening in front of your eyes, that you matter, that decisions taken by you lead to something, then that's an experience that is very, very enriching, very, very satisfactory.
Okay.
So a lot of problems that are held up for 2-3 years for want of attention only. There is nothing which is very complicated or nothing which is very unsolvable. But just the amount of attention that is required and perseverance that is required for a certain case to be solved or certain benefits to be given. For example, pension benefits, for example, some funds or some salaries are held up for want of documents. So when that happens, when those documents are with perseverance, you get those documents, you file them, you proceed the case, you get it approved, and when that money goes to the beneficiary, then at the end of the day you feel that yes, your day of salary has been justified, that okay, today you got your salary and you have done some good job and somebody has got benefit from that. So that satisfaction is there. Apart from that, the status, the honor, the respect that you get in society has no equals. The moment you say you're a civil servant, so the entire perspective of the other person changes about you. So of course, yeah, the perception is definitely a big thing, and these days status and all matters. So in that way also you feel good about yourself, that okay, you're someone, you're one of some power is invested in your post. So so it's good.
Right. What is your suggestion to the kids who are preparing? I should not call them kids, but yeah, kids preparing.
Now I'm approaching my 40s, so yeah, they are kids now. Yeah, so you should know what you're going to sign up for, so that you don't regret it and you don't live your 40 years of career life regretting something.
Right.
So I have always observed that when you're writing pre, your only wish is to clear prelims. When you're writing mains, your only wish is to clear mains. But when you clear everything and get a service, then the bickering starts. Then the cribbing starts. That why did I not get IAS? Why did I not get IPS? If you get IAS, IPS, why did I not get my state cadre? If you get that, so if you want to bicker, it is not going to end. You will get some reason to do that.
Absolutely.
But as I told you, my name was not there in all the 4 lists, and suddenly some opportunity popped up and kind of gave us that life. So I really respect my department and my position that I have got, because this is something I was not going to get and then I got it.
Right.
So when all the roads were closed, all the doors were closed, and then I got this opportunity. So I value it much more. And in our probation, when I went on the first lecture and the lecturer came and the faculty came and said that don't be depressed that you did not get IAS. So that time I felt, why the hell should I be depressed that I did not get IAS? I got something, So, and okay, that was true for me. But by starting the probation, the first day of probation on such a note that don't be disappointed that you did not get IAS, it's like, so what are you going to do now? For the rest of the 40 years, you are going to bicker about this, that you did not get IAS. Okay, fine, you did. But what you have got, what are you going to make of it? That is the real question. Right. So whoever is giving this exam should know that there are very, very limited vacancies. There are very, very talented and hardworking people in the country. Anyways, we are a huge young population with very limited employment resources. Right. So everybody is going to write this exam. Right. And everybody in their own way is beautiful, is very, very good at heart, is very, very talented and very, very deserving. Right. But a limited number of people are going to get selected. So if you get selected, be grateful. And if you don't get selected, please do something worthwhile. That is your passion, that is your skill set. Because everything you do, as I will quote Dharmadhikari sir here because he's been my mentor in UPSC, that when you do something with devotion, with passion, and with honesty, that is Desha Seva. So Desha Seva will not happen only because you're entering into armed forces or only because you're entering into civil services. It will happen when you are true to yourself, when you are true to your profession, and when you are true to your people. Right. So anything you do, all services are required. All work, all new. There are so many new. I mean, armed forces and civil servants might be the oldest professions, but there are so many new areas that are coming up. You can become an entrepreneur. You can become. I mean, everybody is needed now. Doctors were needed. Now, in this pandemic, even the doctors were falling short. Right. So doctors are needed, paramedics are needed, those people who have dedicated years of life into research are needed at a time when it is required. Right. So every profession, every work is important, and you should have multiple options that you will be going forward with, and should not get depressed or disappointed because one exam did not select you.
Right. Right. People do make it their life's goal to clear UPSC. And as you said rightly, it is just one more exam and one more opportunity to, do well in life. But there are other opportunities that people are missing out. I guess that is to each his own. But I love the way you have portrayed, and you have been so positive about so many things. Especially with respect to the way you have come into the service and now the way you're looking at the service. I'm so happy to have spoken to you. And that brings us to the end of this interview.
One thing I would just like to,
But before you go, I just have one more question for you. When you were preparing, this is my favorite question that I ask almost everybody who was cleared during your time. Internet was not a hype, or at least social media was not. But these days, almost everybody who has cleared the service has an Instagram account. They share their pictures, they share the romanticized side of UPSC, but then they fail to project what exactly you would get at the end of the day. Do you think that might affect the people or the kids who are preparing?
See, I think it all boils down to the samskar that you have grown into. If you ask me today, I don't have an Instagram account. I don't go on Facebook because it really consumes a lot of my time. And with 2 kids at home, I don't want to keep looking at the screen when I get the time to look at them. Right. So being a woman also, we tend to give priorities, or we have inbuilt capacity to prioritize things in life. So maybe, and I'm not a very social media savvy person, so I don't get into that. And the other thing, that the very idea that you are what others perceive you to be, that whole idea is so perverse. That whole idea is so beyond my understanding, that how can you be what others perceive you to be? There are 130 crore people in the country, and everybody will have a different perception of you. Right. So how are you what are you going to say? What are you? Which person's perception are you? So finally, it is your own perception that you are. And if you're going to, I mean, it all boils down to the same thing, that what are your definitions of success? What are your definitions of status? What are your definitions of achievement? So finally, it is those 4 or 5 people around you, your parents, your kids, your husband, and a few of your friends that really matter to you. How does it matter to me what Anil Ambani thinks of me? How does it matter to me what Prime Minister thinks of me? Right. Or anybody else, what Madonna thinks of me? How does it matter on social media if you're getting trolled or if you're getting praised? How is it adding value to your life? But when you make your parents proud, when they are with you, because they're the only ones who are going to be with you when you are going to be at your worst. Right. So I think social media, those who are so bogged down by that, maybe you should get more work and should get more life
Right.
rather than being. And apart from that, now it all again depends why you gave these services. If you gave these services to put those pictures on your Instagram account, go ahead and do that. But as the story goes, that a Chakravarti Raja, when he went in heaven and there was a place to write his name, and he went with a wagon full of his people and music and everything, and when he went and when he entered, all the walls were filled with names, and he did not get little space to write his own name.
Right.
And when he asked the doorkeeper that where should I write my name, and he said, okay, you can rub somebody's name and write yours. And so that is the time when he came to know that, oh, what I have achieved is nothing, because now I have to rub somebody's name and write my name, and somebody else will rub my name and write his name. And this has happened over so many centuries. So I am not the one here who has cleared it for the first time or doing something I'm the only one who's doing it. So this arrogance is not required. So in fact, I feel the more anonymous you are, the less disturbed you are. It is good if people forget you. It is good if your department forgets you and keeps you in the place where you are, so that you live a better life.
This is a very different thing than what most of the people who are giving UPSC aspire to. They want to be seen, they want to be in the limelight, they want to be where everybody in the entire whole wide world would know about them. So I guess that this is a different perspective. I don't know how many people would actually live with it, but it was great talking to you, Mugdha. I enjoyed it like anything. I hope that I've not taken much of your time, and
no, it was
who are watching would enjoy this too.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody. Thank you, ma'am.